Our presenter today is Greg Driscoll. He's the president and founder of Professional Pavement Products. He has over 20 years of industry experience, first as a contractor, then as a supplier. He's very hands-on with the development of our Medallion product line of traffic paints and pavement maintenance products and the selection of the over 700 products that PPP currently carries. He's extremely active in several trade associations, including the American Traffic Safety Services Association, or better known as ATSA, the ATSA's Foundation, American Public Works Association, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, Transportation Research Board, American Road and Transportation Builders Association, and several others. Over the course of his career, Greg has been selected to instruct several LTAP and DOT training courses and has presented at several industry trade shows on various topics of pavement maintenance, pavement markings, roadway safety, and retroreflectivity. So without further ado, please welcome Greg Driscoll.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. Well, the most important thing to realize here is that I've been in this industry for 21 years. That's more than some, less than others. And first as a contractor and then as a supplier, so I've been on both sides of the fence. And over the years, I had the benefit of accumulating quite a bit of experience and expertise. And my passion is to use that experience and expertise to help our customers not just survive in this industry, but to thrive in the industry. So let's get started. Let's talk about today's agenda. Today's agenda can be summed up really in this way. We'll identify first the impact of weather on your business, and then we'll talk a little bit about the science and the effect of that weather on your products, and actually on your profits as well. And then we're going to talk about solutions to managing your business around the weather. Unfortunately, we can't manage the weather, so we have to manage our business around it. Let's talk about the problem first. Who's the person in the mirror? Are you the pavement contractor? Well, if that was all you were, then that would be easy. But wait a minute. You're also the salesman. You're the marketer. You're the estimator. You're the foreman. You're the equipment operator. You're the mechanic. You're the accountant. And Lord knows you're the debt collector. The last thing that you have time or the expertise for is to be a weather forecaster. But yet it's one of the most important factors or one of the most important positions in your business. And it's not just about the weather during the application, but you have to be concerned also about the weather before the application, which could create moisture or temperature problems, and the application or the weather after the application, giving that material time to cure out and dry. So when you're looking at, a lot of times when we're applying sealer or even striping, we look up in the sky at the moment, but you got to remember that sky is going to change. It was something different before you got there, it's going to be something different after you leave. So it's important to take all three of those factors, before, during, and after, into account. If the temperature is too cold, you're going to get delamination. If it's too hot, you're going to get steering tracks or pushing. If it's too windy, you're going to get overspray on concrete or, worse yet, on somebody's car. And if it's too wet, it'll just wash away a whole day's worth of work, a whole day's worth of profit, and a whole day's worth of sealer. To determine whether or not to work, you can see why it's so important to accurately predict the weather and understand its effect on your business. It's not just about looking out the window and looking at the sky. You really have to have a good understanding of not only what the weather is going to be, but how it affects your products and your business. Incorrect predictions or not understanding the effects or the risk it's going to cost you money. All right, so going back over this, the weather impacts your business because of a couple things. One is that you have to have the knowledge and the understanding of what that's going to do. So you have to spend time on that. And the other is that if it's too cold, you're going to have problems. If it's too wet, you're going to have problems. If it's too hot, which a lot of people don't understand, if it's too hot, you're going to have problems. So it will affect your business. It will affect your profits. But let's go ahead and talk about the cause. But before I do, let me tell you a little bit of story about this, why this subject's so important to me and why I spend so much time, effort, and money and so forth researching the weather aspect. And really it boils down to this. And usually great things do boil down to this: frustration. It's out of frustration. You know, I couldn't even get the experts to agree on which factors were important, let alone at what levels were acceptable or not. I'd ask one manufacturer or one expert, okay, and they would say dew point. The next one would say, well, dew point's not important, sunlight's important. And the other one would say, well, sunlight isn't as important as temperature. And so I had to go out and find out for myself. First, I had to understand how weather worked. And then I needed to figure out what factors and to what level did these factors affect the dry and curing of our different products. So let's get started with a little weather. In order for sealer or paint to cure or harden, it must dry. In order for sealer to dry, the liquid has to evaporate off. The rate in which the evaporation takes place is affected or controlled by the percentage of liquid in the product and by the weather factors. Applied sealer, when it's properly diluted, at the time it hits the ground, has about 40% solids. So what does that mean? It means 60% of that material is liquid. A high-quality waterborne paint has as much as 75% solids and 25% liquid. So what do I mean about solids? You hear this probably from your manufacturers or from your suppliers. Solids is basically the product that is left behind after the dry cure process. Now I want to show you, by the way, the little symbols and so forth here. These symbols are a representation of the particles within the material. Solids such as sand, tar, and clays, when it's initially applied, the sand, sealer, and clay are dispersed in water. And water is the vehicle of the application. It's the vehicle that gets the solids evenly dispersed throughout the pavement. As the water evaporates, the layer of sealer shrinks and it becomes tighter. And you need to know that it's important to have a complete, what we call dry-through, a complete dry-through to prevent tearing and dislodging of its bond from the pavement. For dry-through or cure to take place, the weather conditions must be adequate for that evaporation. There are 4 weather factors that we're going to talk about, and these are the most impactful on evaporation: temperature, sunlight, humidity, and wind. I'm going to show you how these factors affect your products. We'll start with humidity. Now, so what is humidity? Humidity is the amount of water vapor in the air and how saturated the air is. For example, if you have a 10% humidity, it means that the air is saturated at about 10%. It has 90% room for the water to evaporate in. But if it's 90% humidity, that means 90% of the room in the air is saturated, and you only have 10% of the room for more water or for evaporation. It's important to note that warm air can actually hold more water than cold air. So humidity can be a bit more volatile in cooler temperatures. And if your temperature goes from a high temperature, let's say a higher temperature of 85, and it drops down to 65, that evaporation, or that water content, the humidity is going to increase. I use this, I call it the sponge effect. And basically this is a good way to describe humidity for me. So you have this puddle of water, okay, and you're going to clean it up, and you're going to clean it up with my buddy here, SpongeBob. Now, as the water is soaked into the sponge becomes more and more saturated. The closer to full saturation it gets, the slower it's absorbing. Take a dry sponge and put it in a puddle of water. You're going to see it's going to very quickly absorb the water. But take one that's 90% full already, and it's going to have a much slower effect. This chart here basically just shows you the effect of temperature, and when you have a temperature in relative humidity, what the changes are, or what the speed of evaporation is. For example, here, if you look at this bottom line here, this is at 77 degrees. On this scale of 0 to 100, it's evaporating at probably about 24, 25. But then you look up here at 90 degrees, 95 degrees, and you get an evaporation rate much higher. And of course, if you have 125 degrees, which I highly, 113 to 125, do not seal coat in those temperature ranges. But the idea you see here is that you can have a significant increase in dry time depending on the relative humidity. So, high humidity will cause a much slower dry time for your sealer or for your paint. And it could retard the drying altogether if the humidity is anywhere near the 100%. Also, high humidity will cause a greater chance of tracking. But you need to note that you should not seal coat or paint when the humidity is above 90%. Also, unlike temperature, which we'll discuss next, there is no minimum level of humidity. Simply the lower the better. Now let's talk about temperature. There are two temperatures that you need to be concerned with. One is ambient, and one is which is the surrounding air, and the other is the surface temperature, and that's the temperature of the surface in which you're placing the striping or the sealing on. And it's important to know both of those. And here's why. These temperatures can vary from one another significantly, depending on the surface and the environment. During the heat of the day, the asphalt surface could be as much as 40% hotter than the ambient or the air temperature. But you'll find that at night, the ambient temperature and surface temperatures are more in line with one another. A rule of thumb also to remember is that in the morning, the surface temperature takes longer to heat up. And in the evening, the surface temperature takes longer to cool down. So that's when you're going to see some disparage usually is right at that evening point and that morning point. So you go out to do your seal job and you see that the air temperature, the ambient temperature is 65 degrees, which is in the range of tolerance for sealer. So you go ahead and apply it. But the problem is that earlier that night, the ambient temperature was 45. So that surface has not had an opportunity to heat up yet. So you're applying, even though the ambient temperature is 65 degrees, the surface temperature may only be 50 degrees or 55 degrees. And that puts you at borderline or worse. Here's a little bit more explanation on this. So why is temperature important? Simply, the water, or the warmer that it is, the faster the water evaporates. The heat causes the water molecules to bounce faster and further until they break free into the atmosphere. But the cooler temperatures, just like they slow us down, will slow that evaporation down. And then what happens is that it's harder and takes longer for those water molecules to break free. The effects of temperature. High temperatures mean faster dry times. Temperature is too high, it means the water is evaporating too fast and the particles immobilize so the binder and the filler can't properly fuse together. Remember we talked a moment ago about that dry-through process, and if you notice that those particles were kind of getting in line of one another through the dry process. If it dries too fast, it can be a bigger problem than if it dries too slow. You can end up with a sticky, soft product with high trackability and delamination. Low temperatures. Low temperatures, slower dry time. Temperatures too low, the particles won't fully soften and form a continuous film. What happens again here is that the water is not evaporating fast enough, and so therefore you're not getting that shrinkage and you're not getting that compaction. And I'm going to bear with me on the word cross-linking. It's not technically a cross-linking, but the particles are not going to link together. With low temperatures, you could have some discoloring or splotchy appearance. Usually that goes away over time. You can have, again, increased trackability, and you can have delamination. You should always check your product's labels or spec sheets for a minimum temperature requirement. All right, next we're going to talk about sunlight. So we talked a little bit about humidity. Remember, the higher the humidity, the worse off you are. The lower the humidity, the better off you are. On temperature, if you have a high temperature up to a certain point, and that's about 90 degrees ambient, up to a certain point is better. But once it crosses that, your reaction is happening too fast and a good chance of having your delamination. So now we're going to talk about sunlight. This is interesting to me because we deal with a very, very reputable manufacturer. And one of the things they've always pressed is sunlight, sunlight, sunlight. You can't seal at night. Well, we know our contractors have to seal at night. But I wanted to know, why was sunlight important? I didn't get it. Was it some kind of invisible UV factor happening? But that's not the whole case here. And so I'm going to share with you what sunlight does. Basically, the sun's radiation creates and renews heat, both to the surface and to the air. The less sun, the less renewal of heat there is. Here's an example. Let's illustrate it. Let's say that the surface temperature is 75 degrees and the material is 65 degrees. When the material is applied, the surface temperature is cooler. When the sun is present, it renews that heat. In fact, now that the surface is darker, the sunlight creates an even hotter surface than before the application. But if there's no sun, like on a very cloudy day or at night, and if it's cloudy, watch out for humidity, well, then there's no renewal of that surface temperature heat, causing a slower dry time. Also consider that temperatures at night are cooler, which means that humidity saturation is likely to be higher. Again, as that temperature drops, the humidity will go up. This only adds to the woes of nighttime seal coating. So this is a really kind of reason that the manufacturers are so bent on not sealing at night, because they know that the heat is not being renewed, and therefore you're going to have a slower dry time and more opportunity for issues. So that's why sunlight's important. Now let's talk a little bit about wind speed. There's not much to it, folks. It's basically the wind simply keeps the air circulating, moving the saturated air out and usually drier air in. Wind effects? Well, Wind can affect your sealer in paint applications. First, if there's too little wind or no wind, there is more moisture exposure to the surface, causing the dry and the cure time to increase. If the wind is too strong, well, you know what can happen then. You end up with a Mercedes or a Lexus somewhere near you, and it's always white, and now it's white and speckled black. So, again, high humidity, I'm sorry, whoa. Okay, let's see here. All right, little to no wind, you got more moisture and exposure, and a longer dry cure time. What happens is that surface, right there above that surface where you have that major evaporation, you have a high humidity or high concentration of humidity of that water coming off of the line or coming off of the pavement. And so that wind needs to come in and blow it through. You'll have to excuse this slide. There seems to be an issue with it. Can't believe I haven't caught that one before. Okay, let's recap. So we've got humidity. Humidity affects the ability for moisture in sealer and paint to evaporate. Higher humidity, longer dry times. It's kind of like a traffic jam. When you've got all these entrance ramps coming into high traffic, Texas is well known for this. In some of their interstates, they have and several states have the lights that govern if you can go into the traffic or not. They turn yellow or red and green, and red and green on the entrance ramps. Well, that's to guide that traffic into, or guide you into that traffic. And the more traffic there is, the slower and the longer backed up that line gets, that entrance ramp line gets, because it's a slower process to fit into the traffic. You have the same thing with water. If the water if the air is concentrated or saturated with water, there's going to be a longer line of moisture trying to get in there, and it's going to take longer to do it. Now, temperature determines how fast the moisture in the sealer or the paint will evaporate. The hotter, remember, the hotter it is, the faster those molecules bounce, and the further they bounce, and the quicker that they're going to get out, the water molecules, out of the product. But too hot can cause delamination. Don't forget that, because it's not going to bond properly underneath. It'll never have time to set into the pavement. Too cold, well, it's going to take forever to cure because it's just too much. Those molecules are moving so slow that they can't bounce out and evaporate. Kind of like us. When we're too hot, we don't perform well, and when we're too cold, we move awfully slow. Then there's sunlight. Sunlight renews heat. Less sunlight means less heat renewal. Dropping temperatures means longer dry time. And then wind. Wind replaces the saturated air with drier air, enabling the evaporation process. Too much wind can be detrimental to spray applications and cause debris to settle on the wet material as well. So too little wind, you're not moving the moist air out of the way. Too much wind, and you end up blowing things into the sealer that you don't want, or the sealer onto things that you don't want. Okay, so that's Weather 101. How can your business weather the weather? The two most important things: know the weather and know your products. To know the weather, you must know or must have a reliable weather forecast. We use a couple different ones, and I think we have those links at the end of this webinar. But know the weather, you've got to have that reliable forecast. And the other, you must consider the four primary factors and their effect on your products. Knowing your products is knowing their limitations, and knowing alternative products that when the conditions aren't favorable, knowing what products you can use, for instance, fast dry paints or specialty sealer additives that are designed specifically for a decrease in dry time or an increase in drying. As we all know, the weather can look like this in the morning and then look like this in the afternoon, causing you to miss opportunities to make money. I want to stop there for a moment and share a story with you. A few months ago, I was in our Miami facility, and I had a customer come in, and we were going through. I was showing them how the DAF scale worked. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's what we'll get to in a moment. And this part of looking out the window or looking at the weather and judging your entire day on what you see at that point can be very costly. And again, looking at a weather forecast or using the tool that I'm going to provide you here at the end, the free tool that we offer, is going to make a difference. I'll get back on that story in a moment after we get to the DAF scale. Of course, we know that we can have the opposite. The weather can look like this in the morning. You go and put down your sealer, and then you see this. Especially in your coastal regions, this is a real problem. Judging what the weather is going to be like. But you not only have the daily issues, you also have the seasonal issues. Unless you're in Miami, which sometimes even has to deal with this, as the weather begins to change or the seasons begin to change, you start getting into various risks. Between winter and spring, you have the rain risk, and that's usually a huge one. But a temperature variation risk can be there. So your season, as it stands without understanding this, is usually very tight. I have people that tell me, I will not start seal coating until February 28th or March 1st. Well, you know what? There's a lot of opportunities to get some work done safely in those other times. Most weather sites use information gleaned from the same source, and that's NOAA, N-O-A-A, National. It's basically the National Weather Service. But our favorite source is something called Weather Underground. It gives you great hour-by-hour forecasts and history, and it can help you identify problems with your past applications. For instance, if you have some problems with your sealer and you ask your guys, hey, what was the weather like when you installed? Oh, it was beautiful. It was sunny. It was gorgeous. Well, this is a great way to go back in and look at the history and see if that was really the case before you call your manufacturer to complain, because they're going to do that as well. So it's good to have that in your hands before you call your manufacturer if you have an issue. And it's going to prevent you from having, it's going to help you with your past applications, but it's going to prevent you from having problems in the future. This chart shows you the parameters of each primary factor in which you can apply sealer, and you notice the green, yellow means caution, red means no, do not apply. Conditions are not favorable. But note as you get into the, get out of these optimum ranges, identified by green, and certain cautions have to be taken. The difficulty comes when you try to monitor all of these factors. Again, you're back to being a meteorologist. Sure, you're now a smarter one, hopefully through what we've explained here, but you're trying to reduce your responsibilities, not increase them. But you can see, the optimum range would be the middle of this screen, 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 the middle of this screen. Well, we put all that together in something called the DAF scale. And the DAF scale does all the work for you. All you have to do is enter your zip code, and it does the rest. It gathers the forecast data of your location, properly weighs out each factor of those. Remember those 4 primary factors. And each one of those has a limited amount of weight in that evaporation process. It gives you a simple metered readout, and the DAF scale's been in operation for now, I guess, probably about 2.5, 3 years, providing time after time just incredible accuracy. I'm gonna actually go to the DAF scale live here, and thank goodness it's back up. I don't know how many of you were affected by the recent raid on some of the website management companies, but this certainly was a problem. I'm going to put in, I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, so I'm going to put in 40258. Let's see if I got that memorized well here. Many years ago. Oh, look at this. All right, so this is the DAF scale. Now, if you've seen it before and you haven't been on it in the last few weeks, you'll know that there's a new addition here. And the addition you see is a live satellite shot. In this case, it's a little difficult because it doesn't show you the clouds because there is none. Louisville's got a great, I mean, look at the scale here. They're at 9.85 out of 9.98. So here's how it works, is the red from 0 to 5 means conditions are not favorable, do not seal coat. Conditions from 5 to 7 mean that they're below average and that you should apply with caution. 7 is pretty much average for a proper application. Anything above a 7, you will have better than normal application and therefore better than normal dry time. So you look down, this is today, and you notice that these are dead, and the reason they're dead is because we're past those times now. So the rest of the day at 4 p.m. it's a 9.85 and a 9.98. Now across here, this is what we call our rain bar. And unfortunately, I'm going to pull up another one here in a minute. Maybe it'll have something on the rain bar. But you'll notice that if it's gray in this bar, it will be a 31 to 74% chance of rain, and a black means that that rain is pretty much inevitable. And you have to watch that because this meter does not include rain. It includes humidity, but not necessarily the rain itself, because rain is very unpredictable in its location. So we have to pull that unpredictable number out, and that's why we put the gray and the black fields in there. If you want to know the details of the weather, I'll be honest with you, I use this for my personal weather anyway, if I'm going to the beach or whatever I'm doing. But this gives you this the humidity, and it tells you humidity is in the high range here. Let's see what's dragging this down to 5.84. Humidity is in the high range, 73%. The temperature's in the low range. Okay, now if you have a higher humidity and a lower temperature, that's not a good thing, and that's what's driving the meter down. 31% cloud cover, that's a high range, and 1% or 1 mile per hour of wind speed, that's a low range. You want some wind, but you can't have too many. You see optimum range is about 3 mile an hour. And you have 0% rain chance, 7%, so that's why there's nothing on the bar. You can also, another feature on this is going to DAF scale by night. Let me see if I can't get 33309. Let's try Fort Lauderdale. I think that's their zip code. Let's see if they've got any rain going on. It might help us a little bit. Ah, there you go. Some rain advisory. Here you go. By the way, the story of why we just recently added this, and the reason we did was out of our own situation where we were applying some material, and we were watching the DAF scale, but we had to keep bouncing back and forth from the DAF scale to the radar, DAF scale to the radar. We said, well, let's just put the radar on the DAF scale, and that's what we've got. So there's your rain advisory. Tomorrow, there's a rain advisory in the morning, and then it gets a little bit better. But there's some reasons here. It looks like you've got humidity's not too bad. It's a little up, but you're almost at 7 at a rating of a 7, which is awesome. It was a good place to be. All right, so now let's go to DAF scale by night, and you click on that, and it shows you what this evening will be. So I'm not applying sealer tonight. Even though I'm up above that 5, I'm already borderline. And then when I have a rain advisory at the same time, I'm looking at a 30% chance of rain. I'm not going to be applying sealer. At nighttime, I want that to be in the strong 6.5 plus before I think about applying the sealer at night. So DAF scale, it has some awesome information there. You've got the rain chance indicator, you have the detail drop down, and you have for nighttime application, which our manufacturers do not like. But we understand, and they understand, that you have work that you've got to get done at night. It is free. This is a free service. It's dafscale.com. dafscale.com. So the DAF scale is going to help you during the day, during your application, but it's also going to help you in the seasons. And what this little graph here shows you is this top one is a typical season, and you see the green is extended here to here. But as you use the DAF scale, you'll be able to find more pockets of opportunity outside of these great months. And it depends, and this chart is different depending on where you live and what your season is. But that's the great thing about the DAF scale. It's all about your zip code. It's very localized. Even if you're doing a job outside of your zip code, you put that in because you're not there. You don't know what the weather is, and this will help you do that. But the idea is that it doesn't just help you in just from hour to hour, but it'll help you schedule your sealing and striping throughout the season, and especially as you get near those border seasons. Just real quick on products, this is the Medallion, the Gold Medallion Series pavement maintenance and marking products. It's important that you know your products. You need to read their labels, and I don't care if you use my product or anybody else. Read the labels. I had a guy call me recently, and he said that he had someone slip on some paint, and he asked, "What do I do about it?" And I said, "Did you read the label?" Or actually, what he did, he said, "I got a good idea. Should I put some sand or something in the paint?" I said, "Did you read the label? It says on the label what you need to do when you're putting it on a walking surface, and that's a whole nother issue, and that can be covered in our pavement marking 101 class. But read the labels, very important. Know their specific purposes and their limitations, both in application and in weather. It'll tell you it should tell you what weather conditions are favorable. Quality products like the Medallion brand, you can use these. We have a series called the Black Series, and these are the ones that especially, they can be used at any time, but especially when you have borderline situations, borderline weather, I would use a Zoomplex. It's going to accelerate your dry time much faster than any product out there on the market. I said it. And the MX is going to dry in about 190 seconds to no tracking. Again, there's a difference between that film over dry, no tracking, and protection of rain, and the dry through. So I definitely recommend that you consider going into those products on those borderline conditions. I would say that most vendors have standard products and then have their premium products. Look at those premium products when you go to when you get into that borderline temperature, borderline weather, and make sure that that product is built for that. So questions and answers, that's the presentation part of this webinar. So now kind of for the fun, the questions and answers. And Lynn, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Just a reminder, you can go ahead and ask your questions using the chat box. I do have a couple of them, but a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded, and we'll send that link to you as soon as it's available, usually about 2-3 hours. If you have any questions, Greg's email address is up on the screen right there, as well as our toll-free number, and pretty much anyone in the office can answer or get you on the phone with somebody that can answer. Also, please feel free to visit our catalog online. We have over 700 products that can be shipped nationwide, and you can find our educational opportunities in the Knowledge Center or by typing directly pppcatalog.com/webinars. So here we do have a comment. Oh, thank you for showing us the DAF scale. That looks like an awesome tool. We'll definitely be using that. Let's see. We have, you might have covered this, Greg, but you might want to show them again. What about the jobs that require you to work at night when DAF scale only goes to 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I did cover that, but that's under the night. You have DAF by day. And that's what comes on. This is the default setting when you open up the DAF scale, and then you can just go to by night. Click on that, and by the way, you do notice that it is about every 3 hours. So you have 7 p.m., 10 p.m., 1 a.m., 4 a.m., and 7 a.m. And then if you go by the day, then you'll have the same thing, except it's going to be 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and 7 p.m. Also remember how important it is if you're seal coating at let's go to by night because we got a full scale there. If you're seal coating or striping, remember what look at the scale before and after This is really important. If you have extremely high humidity, cooler temperatures, you're going to probably have some dew or some moisture on the surface. That's a no-no when you're seal coating. So always watch. Don't just focus on the hour that you're going to put it down. Paint is a lot more forgiving. A good, fast, dry, waterborne paint is more forgiving. But definitely when you're seal coating, you got to watch for the 3 hours before and the 3 hours after. But yes, so by night, you just click on them by night, and you'll have that information.
Did you scroll down and show that it shows tomorrow too?
Yes. Okay. So we'll go. It only shows today, tonight, and tomorrow. There's a subscription service coming up eventually, and this is all free. There's a subscription service coming up where you'll be able to actually enter dates that you want, so you can plan out your week. But understand that the further out you go, the more inaccuracies there could be because the forecasting can change. So you always have to keep that in mind. But for now, you can go, when I go here, this is today, and you see it's 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., and then tomorrow you have the entire day for tomorrow and then you have the night in between.
We have someone asking about the accuracy of the DAF scale. Go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I had mentioned that we've had it for about, somebody needs to look this one up, but I think it's well over 2 years. I've got over 2 years in my notes, but I may have been saying that for the last year or two. So we've had it for over 2 years, and the accuracy at one point, at 18 months, understand that this does not exist otherwise. We created it from the ground up with the help of one of the most intelligent men I've ever known, and that was not me. and I think, and you're still nervous as to its accuracy, even when you create it. You know that 1 + 1 = 2, so therefore it's got to be right. But in the end, you still have a little nervousness. And after 18 months, we went back and we compared the data, and we found, I think it was right at 97% accuracy. Again, that accuracy will change if you go further out, but for your next day accuracy was at about 97% as to what we predicted and what actually came through. So it's very, very dependable. I'm going to go back to that story real quick about that customer that came in. Customer came in. I showed them the DAF scale. They're in awe by it. Of course, they're the same way as I was when I first developed it. Is it really dependable? And I said, yes. You got to trust it. So I get a call about a week later, and it's that customer, and they say, I needed to call you and tell you the story. They said, yesterday morning, we got to work, and the weather looked awful. And I told my husband, go on the DAF scale. Greg said to use that. So he said he went on the DAF scale, and he was going to send everybody home. But then he saw the DAF scale turn, and he said, well, it looks like it's going to be better this afternoon. So what should I do? And she said, you know what? Just let's go for it. Let's trust it. And sure enough, he kept his people on for the next couple hours, and sure enough, that weather turned, and they were able to get nearly a full day's work in. And she was just ecstatic about that opportunity, because she said, I would have lost a full day's worth of work, but because of the DAF scale, I was able to get something. Any other questions?
We do have one more. It says you recommended the Black Series for intermittent weather. Can you explain why?
Oh, good question. Let's go back to that slide. The Medallion Series basically has two types of products. One is, we call it the gold label, or the gold medallion, and then we have the black medallion. And the black medallion is a premium product. You can see there's only 2 items in the black medallion series at this point, and that's when we have something that's just extraordinary in performance or design. And in this case, if you go back one more, you see we do have the gold label sealer additive. And that sealer additive is very similar to those others that are on the market from the 2 or 3 other major manufacturers of additives. Very similar. It's designed for fast dry. It's designed for reducing tracking, for your color control, that type of thing. But when you get into the Zoom Flex, now you're talking about a product that is a significant dry time. It alters the dry time significantly. In that, what we found is a lot of additives, fast dry additives, are decreasing the dry time fairly well if the sealer is not diluted. But we don't apply sealer diluted. What we found is Zoom Flex 2 does an incredible job of decreasing the dry time of diluted sealer, by far more than any other product that's out on the market that we've tested against, and we've tested all against pretty much all the majors in regards to that. Then you have the ProStripe MX, and the ProStripe MX is a premium paint in the aspect that it is a hybrid resin that we've used to give you incredible bonding, but yet good hardness. One of the problems you have with paints is that you can have a paint that adheres very well, but because it adheres very well, things adhere to it very well, including dirt, grime, oils, that type of thing. So when we started creating MX, we knew that we had to find a paint or design a paint, and this is designed from the bottom up. ProStripe Plus, which is what we consider our gold label paint, has been on the market for, I guess, probably 15 years. But MX has only been on the market for about 4.5 years. And so we took 2 different resins, we married those resins, and then we took some hardened silica material and we put it in place of the standard filler, which is calcium carbonate, which you would learn in the Pavement Marking 101 course. So we altered this paint to make it harder but yet adhere better. This paint adheres better than any other waterborne paint that we know of, and I'll always say that we know of on concrete surfaces. So it's a great, it bonds very well, it acts like a glue, but at the same time it's still, for that type of paint, it does a very good job of not allowing things to stick to it and tracking and so forth. So they're 2 premium products, and they both, it just so happens that the ProStripe Plus, which is the gold label, the dry time on both of those paints are about the same, which is 190-second dry time to no tracking. But I would recommend the black label when you have more significant situation, either with weather or with conditions of the pavement and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that. All right. We don't have any other questions at this time, so I'd like to thank everyone again for taking the time to join us. I know everyone's pretty busy, and we appreciate you coming out and joining us for these events, and hope to see you online next time. Have a great day.
And Lynn?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Don't forget, if you guys could fill out the survey that's going to pop up, that's really important to me. That helps me to know what I need to alter, what I need to change, what I need to talk more about or talk less about. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you guys would fill out those surveys. Thank you.
Absolutely. I always forget about those. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.